So at this current point in time, we've had a whole series of WandaVision plus an episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But today I want to focus on the MCU Disney Plus shows and ask the question, are they actually a good idea? So let's start off with some real negatives for these. If I'm honest, the first major problem might end up being a lack of budget. Now I think it's quite obvious to say that the MCU shows are not going to get the same budget as the films. Which is fine, and that is completely normal for that to happen to a show compared to a film. But not only have they got less budget, but they've got to tell their story over about 6 hours. But the problem with that is that these sorts of things are stretched over 6 hours, and that means that they've got less money to do more special effects and more action over a 6-hour show. And if I'm honest, that could result in the creators having less action in there, or having less visual effects, and overall making these shows feel slower, which could really be a drain in terms of watching it. Another problem with these shows is there could be a real lack of connectivity to the main MCU. Now I know certain characters are coming across to the TV shows, but I think there could be a worry that these shows won't really progress the MCU narrative very much at all. I think Kevin Feige has literally stated that nothing major will ever happen in a Disney Plus show, because the major stuff has to happen in the films, because that's the thing that most people are going to watch. And yes, characters might cross over from one to another, but they'll never really affect the main MCU narrative going forward. Like, if Darcy never shows up again from WandaVision, no one's ever really going to care that much. The final problem for the MCU Disney Plus shows is definitely overexposure. Now, the way the MCU looks to be rolling out their shows, it looks like there's pretty much going to be MCU content every Friday for the entirety of 2021, if not longer. And while on the face of it that can seem like a great idea, overall that could result in MCU burning out, because if you can get MCU content every Friday, maybe you can just wait for the newest MCU films to be released on Disney Plus. Like, will there be too much MCU? Now ignore that, because that's a load of BS. Now yes, I think those are genuine, legitimate criticisms of what the Disney Plus MCU shows could end up being, but I don't believe it at all. Smaller scale stories are good. No, Falcon and the Winter Soldier might not progress the MCU narrative that much, but it'll give us a point for Anthony Mackie to go from A to B, become Captain America, and also have this epic journey, and that is really, really exciting. Also, if the MCU always tells large story after large story after large story, every time a story is just like large but not quite as large, it becomes uninteresting. That's why films look like, for me, like the 2 Ant-Man films, the first Spider-Man in the MCU, feel really nice when you're watching them all through, because they're just smaller stakes, they just have fun with it, and overall that is a very, very enjoyable approach to take, and that's really what the Disney Plus MCU shows can do, whilst also sometimes, like WandaVision, telling a really big event story. I think the MCU shows can create a more expansive universe. You know, this universe is so wide and there are so many stories to tell that telling them all through films sometimes not only doesn't give us enough time on them, but also, if you make them all films, big budget, you can't tell enough of those stories. Like, you love an expansive universe, and I love to see every little corner of that expansive universe, and the TV shows allow them to do that. And also, I spoke about new MCU every week as like a negative thing. Like, when is that ever going to be a negative? Like, I love this universe. I love the idea that literally every Friday I'm going to be able to enjoy MCU content. Like, that's fantastic. I think the MCU shows also give us a chance to explore characters we just wouldn't get much of in the films. Like, especially now Iron Man's gone, James Rhodes is not going to get that much screen time anymore, unless, again, they do a big event film. But now we've got Armor Wars, where we can literally explore him more and explore some stories with him. It's just really, really cool to see that for me. So from a business standpoint, if Disney make these shows, they make money, which means they continue producing the MCU. And seems like a bonus to me. There we are. That's why the MCU shows are perfect, do everything right in every way, and you should listen to me. Subscribe.
This is Willany, and if you're not already subscribed to the Nerdy Brit, right, you should be, right? If you're not, you're a loser too.
Oh, sorry, I'm just gonna have to change the camera for just this major plot twist that's gonna happen in the video. Oh, plot twist. Camera zooms. Guess what?